Good morning. My name is Aaron. I'm one of the pastors here at Ocean View. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. I know some of you traveled over the last few weeks. Maybe you're still traveling and you're watching us online today. That's great. Glad that you are with us, however you are worshiping today, wherever you are worshiping from. I have a question for us to get started today, and this one you can kind of share with your neighbor if you want to, or you can keep it to yourself. That's how it works. I want you to put yourself in the mindset you were back in like elementary school. So jump in the time machine, go back to when you were a kid, and your teacher asks you a question, and then I want you to think about what you would have answered back then. What do you want to be when you grow up? All right? Now, you share that with your neighbor. Go ahead. Share online too if you're, just share with your neighbor. This is not to embarrass you, shame you in any way. All right. Now, how many of you are doing that thing that you said when you were 8? You're doing that thing now. How many of you are doing that? A couple. Just a few. Awesome. That's great. Last time it was maybe 4. So we have 3 in this one. It's about the same. That's okay. That's not to make you feel uncomfortable or be oh, I'm a failure. What a horrible way to start the year. That's not what this is. So I bring that up because I think for a lot of us, we probably had really big aspirations in our younger years, right? Maybe you answered, I'm going to be president. And then you realize that's a horrible job and you don't want that anymore. Or maybe you said, I'm going to be a professional athlete. And that was your thing until you injured your knee or something like that. Maybe you had these big dreams. And I bet they were centered on an idea that you wanted to grow up and make a difference in the world. That you wanted to grow up and have some kind of impact in the world. For me, if you were to ask me that question when I was a kid, I would have said, I want to be a writer. I want to be a teacher. I want to be an actor. I had all kinds of ideas, right? Some of them I have done. Some of them I have not. But I had these ideas that I had big plans that I was going to make some kind of mark in the world, make some kind of change in the world that people could identify with. I think that's something that many of us, if not all of us, have kind of in us as we grow up, that we want to have an impact and make a difference in this world. There's just something that nobody told us, is that the world is always changing. So as much as we want to make a difference in the world that we want to make a difference in is constantly changing and revolving, and new stuff is coming all the time. You know this. I grew up when I was a kid. We had no internets. That was not a thing. We didn't have it until I was middle school, late middle school, maybe high school. And then everybody had the internet. And you had those AOL discs that you used as coasters and Frisbees. You remember? They'd send them in the mail, 10,000 hours for that month, whatever it was. Yeah? And you had these massive furniture pieces in your living room that folded up like a cabinet. And then you open it up. And you had a command center with a computer and shelves and a printer and all of that, and you were I can rule the world. And then you close it all up because your parents put the internet away. And that's how you put the internet away. You folded this massive cabinet up. And then we got laptops, we could take the internet with us. And now we have it literally with us all the time, right? And it was this idea that we could change the world. We could have a huge impact in this world. You might remember the Greek god Atlas. If not, you'll remember the statue of him, right? It's this guy, massive guy, who's holding the globe over his head, right? The story is, as punishment, he has to carry the world on his shoulders. And as kids growing up, this drive in us to when we're going to make a difference in the world, at times it could feel like a lot of pressure, like we were going to carry the world on our back. And it seems so overwhelming that I think as we grew up and we saw how much the world was changing, that what we did is we took the globe, we shrunk it, we put it in our pockets. It's still heavy, but the idea of making a difference in it, very, very small now. Because the world is a very loud place. And how can our voice make any kind of difference in it? Especially considering that if you're a follower of Jesus, the idea of being in this world and making a difference in it, it gets messy, right? Over the next few weeks, we are going to talk about this idea of where does our faith and following Jesus intersect with this drive that we have to interact with the world around us and make a difference in it. So if this is your first time here, I'm really glad that you're here. I would encourage you, since it's the start of the new year and maybe you're like finding your rhythm, I would just encourage you, like if you're here today, I'm so glad, stick with us for 3 more weeks. Stick with us through the month of January so we can have like a complete conversation. Because I think that'll help us best to put this conversation today in context of that. You've probably been, if you've graduated high school or if you've been to a graduation or maybe college, there's usually a commencement speech where they say something to the effect of, you're gonna go out and change the world, right? And we put that burden on people. I taught high school for 1 year. That's not because I hated it, I loved it, but it was difficult. And I remember having a conversation with one of my students who wasn't living up to his potential. And I gave the old, let's live up to your potential teacher speech. How many of you ever got one of those growing up? So I gave it to him, and he was like, I don't need to do that. And I said, well, don't you want to go to college? As teachers say. I said that. And he said, no. I said, oh, that's the only argument I had, right? He said, no, I'm just going to graduate from high school, and then I'm going to go be a firefighter. So I'm going to invest my time and energy in other things rather than doing homework every night. I said, oh, well, great. But what if you change your mind? I'm not going to. Sure enough, he did not. He became a firefighter. I sent him a message and said, man, you stuck with it. I'm so proud of you, because he did exactly what he said he was going to do. For some of us, it's not that way. For some of us, we have drive and ambition, and it diminishes over time. And we're resigned to just make our small mark in the world. The idea of changing the world, the idea that we can have some monumental impact, no, we're okay not to have that. We're going to talk about this over the next few weeks. We're going to start today with this one simple word that I think will carry us through the next few weeks. That's the word culture. When I say the word culture, my guess is something comes to your mind. It could be a little abstract. Maybe it's made up of media or entertainment. Maybe it's made up of political pundits or whatever, or just society at large. We think about culture, and if I was to ask you, hey, define culture for me, it would be difficult because it's always changing. We understand the idea of culture. We talk about subcultures, which means that there is some kind of culture, and then there's all these like other cultures that are minor underneath it. Maybe you've heard of multicultural, the idea that there are some smaller cultures and they all kind of come together and it's multicultural. You've heard of counterculture, the idea that there is a culture and then there are other cultures that work against that culture. But what is culture? It's kind of hard for us to wrap our brains around, so don't worry. I took Latin in high school, so I'm going to walk us through this, okay? The root word for culture is colere. Now, Miss McLeod might be upset with my pronunciation, but I'm going with it, all right? It means to inhabit, till, worship, or cultivate. That is the root word from which we get culture. It was originally used with this intent that we are growing stuff in a garden, on a farm, agriculture, right? This idea that we can cultivate the land, hence culture. And so we take this word, and over time, of course, it shifts, it changes. Science comes around. I mean, science has always been around, but you understand, we put it in a petri dish, and now we say we're growing what? Cultures in a petri dish. And then arts comes along. There's a big emphasis on arts and writing and all of that. And now all of a sudden, it pertains to the individual's soul. It's the idea that, oh, that person is very cultured. You've probably heard that expression. And now in our present context, it really has to do with not just the individual, but with society as a whole. What is the culture doing? What are these cultural trends? So if you take the word culture and you just think about it from that perspective, what we're really saying when we talk about culture is we're talking about tending to a farm and everything to trending on social media. That is a vast amount of space for a word to take up. Culture. And then that begs a question that I think about sometimes, maybe you do as well. Are people influencing culture, or is culture influencing people? The answer, yes. At this point, some of you are like, I'm ready to skip philosophy class. Can I leave? It's okay. We are going to talk about Jesus now, because I think Jesus has something very profound to say about this idea, because he lived his life in such a way that shows us and demonstrates for us how these things interact with one another. And it really comes to this one idea that before he left, after he died, was buried, and rose again, and hung out with his disciples, just before he leaves, he tells his followers something that I think is important for us to understand. And here's what he said, and you've probably heard it before: go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. This purpose, this new mission that he has given to his followers is to go into all the world, to go make a difference. See, that drive in us to go and change the world, that's not an American idea, that's not a new idea. I think that idea is something that God put in all of us because we are made in his image. And so we have this drive in us to make a difference in the world. But sin entered the world, and that drive diminishes over time, or it finds different purposes than what it was intended for. That word world in the Greek is cosmos. You've probably heard that word. Usually when we think of cosmos, we think of the great expanse of space and galaxies, the universe. So Jesus is saying, hey, go into all the cosmos and preach everywhere. That feels heavy. That feels probably heavier than just one guy carrying the world on his shoulders. That feels like I'm supposed to carry the entire universe on my shoulders, to go into all the cosmos to make a difference. That can get very heavy. But of course, he doesn't mean just the physical planet of space and time and all of that. He's talking about humanity. He's talking about society. He's talking about cultures. Go into all the culture. Now, I grew up in church in the 90s, and there was this wonderful phrase that was said a lot. It's still said today, and is a great phrase. And maybe you've said it. You might have worn the t-shirt. Maybe you said it to your kids, especially if you're trying to raise them to follow Jesus. And that is that we are living in the world, but we are not of the world. And that is a great way to live, right? It reminds us that, yes, I am existing in this cosmos, in this world, in this culture, but yet I am not of the world. But it creates a lot of tension for us in trying to live that way. Our response as followers of Jesus to this idea that we are in the world, but we are not of the world, kind of creates a little bit of a barrier for us. How do we then interact with this world that we are told we're not actually of? There's an author named Andy Crouch. He wrote a book several years ago, and he kind of categorized our response as followers of Jesus, typically falling into one of these 4 categories. He said, as it relates to followers of Jesus, our response is usually to condemn it. And you've probably experienced this. Whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, it's the idea that followers of Jesus, Christians, often speak very loudly about the things they are against. They condemn it right away. Maybe you've experienced the critique, which in and of itself is not necessarily bad, but oftentimes that critique becomes not critical of the thing, but critical of the people. And when something becomes critical of people, then it becomes very judgmental, something that Jesus told us, hey, let's not do that. Maybe you've experienced copying culture. This was big in the 90s when I was a kid. And those of you that lived through this, you know that there was like heavy metal Christian stuff. It was just meant to sound like everybody else. We didn't know what they were saying, right? It was there. And that still is a thing. That's okay. And then sometimes this is too difficult. I'll just consume it. I won't have any filter at all. I'll just blindly consume whatever it is that society is throwing at me. These are typically our responses. But Jesus didn't do any of those things. Jesus did something different. And if we are called to go into the world, wouldn't it make sense for us to do it the way that he did it? Wouldn't it make sense for us to look at his example? Because his example is about creating something new. I mean, think about it. He came to earth. He lived a life to model for us what it was like to have a relationship with God. And yet, in his death, burial, and resurrection, he undid the old covenant and gave us something new and renews in us a new purpose and a new desire and a new relationship with God that lasts forever. John writes as much in his account of the gospel. In John chapter 1, John said this, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning." The idea that Jesus is God and has always been there. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. That is still true today, that as dark as the world gets, the light is still there. Darkness cannot overcome it. He goes on to say that the Word became flesh. In other words, not only was Jesus there at the creation of all things, of the cosmos, not only did culture then begin to be cultivated, the Word then became flesh and dwelt among us. He took on human form. He stepped into it. Can you go back to that verse real quick? We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. He steps into the darkness. He steps into the chaos. He doesn't come and condemn it. In fact, he said the opposite. He said, "I have not come into the world to condemn the world." He didn't come into the world to critique it, although he did have some criticism reserved especially for the religious people who clung to their religion more than a relationship with God or a relationship with people. He didn't come and copy what the world was doing, and he didn't come and just blindly consume everything that the world had. Instead, he created something new. He cultivated something brand new that we could have life, an eternal relationship with the Father forever. He desires that thing that's in us, to want to make a difference in the world, that maybe we've kind of buried, that maybe we've kind of put to the side, or maybe we've repurposed for our own thing. He says, "That's mine. I want to do something new with that. I want to bring that to a new life." If you're a follower of Jesus, he wants to bring that calling to you to make an impact and a difference in the cosmos. And that feels overwhelming. If you're like me, when I think about that, I'm like, that's very heavy. How do I even do that? That seems like a really big undertaking. It is. But he gives us some insight, and John wrote it down. I want you to picture this moment. Jesus is about to go be crucified, and he's with his disciples, and as they're walking along to go to a garden to pray, he is praying as they walk. He's praying for his disciples. He is praying to God out loud. His disciples can hear him, and he is praying for them. It's going to be on the screen. You can read there. You can listen here. But just think about this. Jesus praying for this moment here. He says, "I am coming to you now." He's talking to God the Father, saying, "I am coming to you now, but I say these things while I am still in the world. While I am still in this dwelling, while I am still dwelling among my creation, I am saying this so that they may have the full measure of my joy within them." Just a side note, extra, like he's praying out loud for the people around him, I would encourage you, pray out loud for the people around you, within earshot. There's something beautiful in that Jesus is saying, I'm saying this out loud now so that they can hear this, so that their joy can be full. There's something restorative in that. Don't be afraid to pray out loud for somebody. That's extra. He says, I have given them your word, and the world, the culture, the cosmos has hated them. For they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. Just pause there for a second. He's saying that his followers are not of the world any more than he is of the world. He is not of this world, and he is saying we are not of this world either if we are his followers. You might be thinking that's confusing because I was born in this world. Correct. But now, if you're a follower of Jesus, it's something different. It's something new. You have been reborn. He has given you a new life that is not of this world, any more than he is of this world. Do you get that? That's huge. He says, my prayer is not that you take them out of this world. Don't take them out of the cosmos. Don't take them out of the culture, but that you protect them from the evil one. He says it again. They are not of the world, even as I am not of it. It's so important. He says it twice. It's a reminder to you and I, if you're a follower of Jesus, this isn't home. Your perspective, your drive, your ambition, it's not of this world anymore. It belongs somewhere different. Sanctify them, make them holy by the truth. Your word is truth. The way that we get perspective that this is not our world, that we are not of this place, is his word, is truth. When we filter the world around us through this, we are reminded that we are not of this world. We are just in it. We're just in it. As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. For them I sanctify myself, that they too may be truly sanctified. So Jesus is talking to God out loud. His disciples are hearing this. They're being told that they are no longer of this world anymore, that it's different now. And then Jesus does something really cool. He starts praying for you and for me. Right here, today, January 5th, 2025, Jesus prayed for you in this moment, thousands of years before you showed up. You want to know what he said? He said, my prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message. That's you, if you're a follower of Jesus. That all of them may be one, past, present, future followers of Jesus. That they may all be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. That's the same language he used when he said, I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you abide in me, I abide in you. There it is again. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. I in them, you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you loved me. The world will know, the cosmos will know, the culture will know that you are not of this world and that he came to rescue them. That's massive. That's for you. You're meant to change the world. And if it feels really heavy, I hope that it feels a little bit lighter now. Because he doesn't leave it to us alone. He says we are going to be equipped by his word. We're going to be equipped by his spirit. Let's go back to Latin class real quick. Colere, to inhabit, till, worship, or cultivate. Those don't sound like heavy words. It doesn't feel overwhelming to me when I think about it like this. I don't think of worship as overwhelming. I don't think of cultivating something as overwhelming. In fact, it's quite freeing in a sense. Maybe it's why Jesus said to his followers once, he said, hey, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. If you're tired of carrying around the world all the time because you're so driven to make a difference in it, or maybe you don't understand it, like, listen, just come to me, I will give you rest. He said, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light. It's like Jesus is like, hey, stop trying to carry around all of that, the pressure that we place on ourselves to make a difference in this world, to change it. Like, stop it. I'll take care of that. And he takes that off of us. And what did he tell us to do instead? He said, pick up your what? Cross and follow me. Where does it lead? Death. But that's not all. It leads also to what? New life. A life where we don't have to carry all of that weight anymore. Now, where that gets weird is because Jesus said, hey, go into all the world. Go make a difference. But then Jesus says, it's easier than you think. But we still live in this tension, don't we? And John felt that. John grew up without Jesus. He grew up living in a world where it was just traditions and it was regulations and it was rules. And then he meets Jesus and Jesus says, hey, follow me. So John starts following him. He's with him year after year, experiencing all that Jesus did. He's there when Jesus is crucified, buried, and then he sees Jesus alive again. And it's after that that Jesus says, hey, go into the world, go into the cosmos, go into the culture, and make a difference. And people start following Jesus that had never met him before, just because John was telling them about them. And now that movement grows, and it takes not much time at all before governments and religious leaders decide to try to squash it, right? They start persecuting people who are followers of Jesus. And the darkness grows, but the light is going to still be there. But in the midst of all that darkness, John writes this to the church. He tries to remind them, tries to impart to them and to us something really critical. He says this, do not love the world or anything in the world. Don't love the culture. Don't love the cosmos. Don't love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, everything in the cosmos, everything in the culture, the subculture, the whatever, everything, all of it, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, it comes not from the Father, but from the world. And remember, you're not from this world anymore. You're just in it. And remember this too, that the world is passing away. The world and its desires are passing away. Whoever does the will of God, though, lives forever. It's all fleeting. The striving, the pressure, whatever it is, doesn't matter. You want to make a real difference in this world, you've got to trade all of that and pick up what Jesus offers you. The one who does the will of God lives forever. Then wouldn't it make sense for us to know what the will of God is? If that's all we got to carry around, I'll carry it. What's the will of God? Someone asked Jesus once, hey, what is the greatest commandment? If we could just give me the one thing, because it's too much pressure to carry everything, give me one thing that I can carry, Jesus, what would it be? And Jesus answered this question. And maybe you've heard the answer. You might know the answer. Let's take a look at it. Jesus said this, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Your heart, soul, and mind, those are the things that the world, the cosmos, the culture is trying to get, right? It's always in competition for those things. And Jesus says, no, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. But he doesn't stop there. He says, this is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. The second is equal to it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments. Everything, how you love others is shown by your love for God. And your love for God is shown by how you love others. Jesus says it. You want to know what the will of God is? Follower of Jesus in this world to make a difference. Love God love others. You're probably thinking, that's too simple. It should be more complicated than that, right? There's no striving in that. There's not like, what is the thing I have to do? Whatever it might be. Where's my checklist? That's it. Love God, love others. So after thinking about all this, here's a question. What if the best way to influence the world is simply to just love your neighbor? What if it's that simple? You want to make a difference in the cosmos? You want to go out and change the world? Maybe you buried that idea a long time ago. I am telling you, listen, if you're a follower of Jesus, he is recalling that. He is resurrecting that in you because you are meant to live for something, to go into the world, the cosmos, your neighbor's house. You are meant to go into the world, your school, the kid sitting next to you in class, the one that puts his boogers under the desk, the neighbor with the noisy dog down the street, the kids who put their scooters behind your car. Again, love them. The employee who you feel like is slacking off all the time. The boss that you feel like is always on your case. The teacher that's giving you the teacher speech. There's greatness in you. Listen. You love your neighbor. That is the impact that you have on the world. That is the ripple in the cosmos. That's the thing that can change everything. And not just to bring it, not just because, no, you're sharing the love of Jesus with them when you do that. Why? How? Because he said so. Listen, you're sanctifying you stay in the Word. You sanctify yourself by reading the truth. He said the truth gives you new glasses to put on where you're not going to see the world from this perspective anymore because you're not of this world. You want to put on the glasses of a different world, of the world that he's from, because you are not of this world any more than he is of this world. This is it. This is the lens. This is the filter. This is it. A few days ago, we just started as a church reading through the Bible this year, in the Bible recap, in the Bible app. Like, you can do that. We're only 5 days in. Jump in. Start getting the filter. Start reading the Word. Start finding the truth. He gives you a spirit, the Spirit of God in you. He prayed for it, that you would be in him and he in you to make a difference right where you're at. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to build anything. You just love your neighbor. What would it be like if we just started trading that? What would it look like where you work, in your house? What would it look like for our city? What would it look like as we look to plant another campus out in Conway? What does it look like for us to just love our neighbor? It starts with us making a choice to just say, you know what? God, I buried that drive. God, would you renew it? Would you help me to see the world the way you do? Will you pray with me? God, thank you for your truth, your word, and how it sanctifies us. God, thank you for loving us. Thank you for allowing us to be in this world while not being of this world. What a heavy burden to carry, to be of the world and in it. Instead, you've given us something far greater. God, as your followers, will you renew a passion in us to make a difference, to love others well, to see things from your perspective? God, for anyone in this room who's carrying the weight of the world, that maybe hasn't met you yet, that maybe hasn't trusted you to find rest, God, would your Spirit speak to them that they would come to know you as their Lord and Savior, that you would take the weight off of them. God, may we look to you as we offer ourselves to you, as we want to make a difference in this world, not for self, but for you and for your kingdom. Give us opportunity this week. May your Spirit prompt us. May we respond in truth to it. And may we see you work. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.